today's show, where I am excited to have another guest on today. This time I will be having another parent on to discuss the state of childcare. And yes, I think it is appropriate to call it a crisis, the childcare crisis in the United States. But before we jump into that interview, let's jump into our quick hits of the week, starting with the tariffs. So Trump issues sweeping tariffs as the markets plunge. Trump called this Liberation Day. I don't know who it was liberating, but nonetheless, he issued, like I said, sweeping tariffs to nearly every single country, including random pieces of land inhabited mostly by penguins. He also hit them with tariffs, so penguins get it together, pay your fair share as well, I guess, according to President Trump. But there was one notable exception, which I'll get to later. Now, obviously, other countries are not just going to bow down, so this sparked retaliatory tariffs and what is going to be probably a pretty painful trade war that's going to impact me and you the most, the average American. Now, who this is also impacting, the Dow dropped by 2,200 points, and the S&P market went down by 6% after the retaliatory tariffs were hit. And guys, who this really impacts the most in terms of the stock market is people near retirement age, right? People who are looking to retire, who have money invested in stocks and things like that in the stock market. And this tanking may have lost them thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on how much was invested. I know our personal investments myself have lost well over $1,000 just since Donald Trump has been elected. So the markets do not respond well to this. And I do not see it necessarily getting better in definitely the immediate. Now, the one country Trump did not hit with tariffs, or one of the few, was Russia. Not surprising. He looks up to Vladimir Putin like a savior, like some kind of, I don't know, heroic figure of his. He likes to play buddy-buddy with him because, guys, he likes the authoritarian rulership that Putin has been able to institute in Russia. He wants to do something similar, so he tries to emulate Putin as much as possible. So it's not surprising at all that he did not hit Russia with tariffs. I guess he's scared of Putin. I don't know, Trump, are you scared of him? I don't know. But he did not hit Russia with tariffs. Now, in terms of how this is going to impact me and you, expect prices of nearly every item, because these are wide-ranging tariffs, and we do not have the infrastructure, nor does any country really have the infrastructure to build and create everything you need on your own soil. That is why we have international trade. So expect the price of nearly every single item to go up. Also prepare yourself for a potential recession. With these tariffs now, the recession chances rose from 40% to 60%. And as always happens in the United States in times of economic struggle, I would predict that the wealth inequality will grow dramatically from these tariffs, meaning everyday Americans there will struggle to increase their income and wages and things like that, whereas the rich will just get richer, because in the history of the United States, that's what happens during times of economic struggle. Also, we have the unemployment rate rising due to the mass layoffs and budget cuts from the Trump administration. So this is really a toxic stew, and that is why the recession chances are hitting over 60% now. So just prepare yourself for that. I think the times ahead are going to be really, really tough. And no, it's not necessary. The economy was on an upward trend before Trump was elected. He got elected and then tanked things. So do not believe the lie that this had to happen or this was necessary. Not true at all. Moving on to story number 2. This is a very positive, exciting one. So flip from story number 1. But story number 2, liberal judge wins Wisconsin seat despite Elon Musk's spending. So liberal judge Susan Crawford was elected to the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And why does this matter? This is a huge win for the Democrats because Elon Musk spent $21 million in this individual election alone in hopes of getting a conservative judge in that position, so winning that election. But guys, the Wisconsin voters balked at that. Elon Musk was giving away $1 million checks, But Wisconsin voters were like, no, we do not like this corruption. We do not like what this administration is doing. We don't like this obvious bribery. And that is very inspiring to see. That gives me a little hope in these dark times. Now, more liberal judges, guys, can also help reshape the balance of the judiciary branch, because right now, the judges are not representative of the American public. It is skewed way too far conservative in terms of how the American public generally feels about issues. So anytime we can install more liberal judges to help, liberal judges, I should say, to help with that balance, that is great. And in this specific situation, it kept the liberal majority, or preserved the liberal majority 4-3 after a liberal judge did retire. Story number 3, back to kind of the negative, but it is what it is, guys. I got to give you the information. Maryland father was sent to El Salvador prison due to what the White House is calling an administrative error. And this is case in point to exactly what I've been talking about on this podcast about immigration. No, guys, this administration is not, I would argue they were never focused on this, but they're also not qualified and capable enough, because they're incredibly inept, of just making sure they are deporting criminals. That's not what's happening, because once again, they're incredibly inept. They don't know how to get that done. So whatever nonsense propaganda that you have heard from the right wing about that, shoved down your throats, that they're just trying to get rid of the criminals, the gang members, that is false. I want to remind you guys, most immigrants, and we are a nation of immigrants, do far more good in this country than harm, okay? Immigrants are far less likely to be committed of a crime and go to jail than natural-born U.S. citizens, okay? So this connection of crime to immigration has always been troubling to me, because it's just been a scapegoat to pick a group during this election cycle to look at and demonize, basically. But guys, we have the right to due process in the United States. And to be clear, the White House admits this was a mistake. So this isn't some crazy left-wing conspiracy theory that you guys may think. The White House itself said it was an administrative error. And think how badly they messed up, because this administration never admits they do anything wrong, even when it's clearly wrong and they're caught on video doing things wrong. So think about how egregious of a mistake this was for them to actually admit, you know what, we did this one wrong. So just think about that. Now, a judge has ordered, the return of this innocent man. His name is Kilmore Armando, but this administration has defied judges' orders before. Furthermore, I don't know if they'll be able to locate this individual due to their ineptness. So if this story, guys, and them just snatching people and disappearing people off the street is not upsetting to you because, oh, this isn't me, that's deeply concerning. I want to be clear, if they are doing this to anyone indiscriminately, right, taking them, shipping them off to other countries and putting them in prison, that could happen to you too, okay? So I pray that this father is returned. I pray that this stops happening. But we will see what happens with that story. Now, fourth story, Trump is flirting with a third term as president. Now, although this is concerning, I am not surprised by this at all. I just mentioned how much he loves Putin. He loves authoritarian rule. He wants to be in power, so him flirting with a third term should not be surprising to anyone. That does not mean it is not concerning. That does not mean you just sit on your hands, Democrats, and wait and see what happens. This is clearly a violation of the 22nd Amendment that states no person should be elected into office for more than 2 terms. We have seen, guys, what lack of term limits can do with some of our entrenched House and Senate representatives who have been there seemingly since the dinosaurs have been around. It destroys democracies, guys, to have the same people entrenched in power for long periods of time. That is why something like the 22nd Amendment exists. But once again, this is more proof that Trump I go back and forth, guys, because it kind of depends on the issue. He either doesn't know the Constitution. I don't know if he knows the 22nd Amendment, or he just doesn't care. Either way, it is deeply troubling that the head of the country either does not care about the Constitution or does not know. Both of them deeply concerning. Fifth and final story, $30 billion in medical debt was erased, which protected millions of patients. So I'm going to give you the details of this one. New York's undue medical debt has agreed to pay off $30 billion worth of unpaid medical bills with Virginia's Pendrick Capital Partners. In terms of specific numbers per patient, ladies and gentlemen, the average debt per patient being paid off is about $1,100, with obviously some patients being far above that value. Now, without this forgiveness, as unfortunately many of you listening may have experienced, if you have medical debt because you get sick, in this country, collectors come after you, they target you, it can affect things like your credit score, and it's just the broken system that we currently live in. It's the system we have in the United States of America. Now, this story is only a small debt or a small step in the medical debt problem that we face in the United States, because medical debt, guys, reaches over 100 million Americans, and Americans borrowed approximately $74 billion to address medical debt in 2024 alone. So I look at these stories, guys, as not like rainbows and butterflies and all feel-good story. Rather, it makes me think how corrupt this system is and how we need to continue to fight against this broken healthcare system, because we pay more than anyone else in the world for worse results than almost any developed country in the world. It's just an insane system, and it's not even guaranteed, which is crazy. It is a human right. Healthcare is a human right. People should not go into debt, guys, and potentially have to file for bankruptcy because they get cancer, because they need insulin, whatever, because they have sickle cell anemia, whatever treatment you may need because you are sick. It is insane that in the United States, you know you're probably going to enter bankruptcy if you don't have coverage provided by an employer, not provided by the government as a human right. People should also not, like, these are other kind of feel-good stories. People should not have to go to GoFundMe to create, like, a page to provide funding for their medical treatment, okay? Or provide something for a transplant that they cannot afford. These guys are put in as feel-good stories, but I want you guys to think when you see these, and it should trigger you more to think, this shouldn't have to exist. We should have a system where GoFundMe is not the number one, like, healthcare provider in this country. That is a broken system. And this New York's undue medical debt, it's great they forgave these $30 billion and they're helping, it seems, but it shouldn't have to exist. And that is why this story is very important. We still need to address the fundamental problems and the corruption we have and the greed we have in our healthcare system. And that story concludes our quick hits of the week. But before we jump directly into the interview, what I want to do first is discuss a little bit about the price of Parenthood, so you guys are aware of what figures we are talking about. And I'm going to start by pulling up this graphic now. It is from Pew Research Center, but it is actually from a few years ago. So these figures that you're seeing, guys, they are more now. So take a deep breath when you're looking at these if you have not had a kid yet or you're planning to, but these prices are actually higher now. But the overall trend is younger kids require more work, so they are more expensive, and areas with larger populations tend to be more expensive. Now, when people generally ask me about the price of childcare, what I generally say is it's like a second rent or mortgage. So that is not down to the dollar, obviously, and it depends how much you're currently paying for your rent or mortgage and how much support you have in your specific county with childcare or your specific situation. But that is generally a good ballpark estimate, is take your rent or mortgage, and that will probably be how much you need to pay for childcare. Once again, depending on your situation. I happen to live in a big city, so that is generally what I use. Now, because of these prices, and once again, they are bigger even now, are greater than what I showed you in the graphic, people are struggling, obviously, to afford childcare. So in 2022, 1 in 5 parents, so 20% of parents, reported challenges paying for childcare. And when you look at low income parents, that percentage basically doubles to almost 4 out of 10 parents. And that is obviously a problem because you need to have childcare for you to go to work and support, but financial strain always or most of the time can really present certain problems within the family unit and the household if people are trying to scrape by, or maybe you're having mom or dad have to work multiple jobs, different things like that, just to afford for childcare. And that is leading to less people also having kids because of their understanding the difficulties that come with the financial strain, not to mention just the general difficulties of raising a child. But good research here is showing, or if you're trying to address this issue, let me say it that way, this graphic is clearly showing a lot of Americans do say providing free childcare would help in them having more children. So, with all of that groundwork kind of laid out, now I'm excited to throw over to the interview that I did with a fellow parent on the child care crisis in the United States. Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am super excited to bring on another guest today to talk about childcare. So I'm going to welcome to the stage Janae. Janae, how are you doing today? And more importantly, how is the little one who has already been born doing?
Right? The most important one. Well, I'm doing really good. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, she's doing great. She's actually with her grandparents. We love a free weekend
Yes.
before we become a family of four. And so yeah, but she's doing great. She just turned 4. And obviously we have a little one on the way. So just soaking it all in before that
Yes,
happens.
and how far away are you from baby number 2 entering the picture?
4 weeks. I'm counting down the days.
Are you at that
It's
stage
almost
where you're like over the pregnancy and you're ready to be done, or are you kind of like holding on and are kind of worried that number 2 is coming? Like, how are you feeling?
that. I think I'm kind of like, once I get to 37 weeks, which is like considered full term, then I'm like, all right, it's time to let's get that eviction notice going. It's going to be walking curbs,
Right.
getting dates, all that stuff.
Put in the papers, right? All right. So thank you as well for joining. Not just, you're taking the time as well. So I appreciate that. So as you just talked about, you are already a parent and you're soon to be a parent of another one. So can you tell the audience a little bit about with your first child? What was the parental leave like, with your job? And were there any difficulties navigating it? Just what was your overall experience like with your first child?
Yeah. So we had our daughter Austin back in 2021. So I was pregnant primarily during the pandemic. And fortunately, like navigating the leave policy, I worked at like a state institution, was simple. And they made it very easy for me, especially for my like first child. So that was helpful to know. And I had about 12 weeks. I think the more challenging part was that my husband didn't really have any time. So I always tell people that like we picked Austin's birthday because of like a botched family leave policy. My husband only got 2 days. And so I had a planned C-section since she was breech. And the doctors are like, oh, do you want to do it on Friday or Monday? And I'm like, well, you only get 2 days. So we might as well not have those 2 days be in the hospital. So yeah, I think kind of just like the discrepancy between like our different leave policies was probably one of the most challenging parts.
And can you speak a little bit? Like I know when my wife gave birth to our child, like having only one parent at home from what I've seen is not sufficient to handle a newborn. So, can you speak a little bit if you agree with that and the difficulties, if so, with, basically your husband being back at work and you're left to take care of a newborn almost immediately?
Yeah, I mean, I think emotionally it was a lot. Like I'm adjusting to becoming a new parent. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. Like shout out to like all of the different like online resources and things you could do to like Google and things like that, but I think for us what was hard was like I was getting to bond with our daughter, but then my husband, he was having to wake up early, go to work, and he would come back around what we call witching hour. And she's like, who is this man? And so we had to like really adjust there. I think for me, like, my husband was incredibly supportive and so helpful and did everything he could, but obviously he also had to work. Um, so I think what was like the most hard was knowing that, like, okay, I'm getting this time to really bond with her, and now we have to get creative on what that looks like for you. But also nights, you're exhausted and you have to work the next day, and I'm exhausted because I've been, managing a newborn all day. So I really do think that, like, one of the things that I feel strongly about is that family leave policies should be for both birthing parents and adoptive parents, because you do need multiple people supporting you as you're navigating, a newborn.
Yeah. And for me, just for transparency too, my leave is what I feel like a lot of people use at the federal level. It was FMLA leave. So in case the audience isn't familiar with that, and I'm going to pull up some of these graphics now, it is not a guaranteed paid leave. It's just guaranteed that you don't get fired and you have your job. Now, in the current state of the economy, we can see right here on this map, mothers in the United States, no paid leave. You can see the graph or the chart, excuse me, from around the world here. And fathers, Janae kind of mentioning how that is a need as well. But you see even more troubling trends, I guess, worldwide. But if we're focused specifically in the United States, it is still red there. So I don't know. Why do you think, I'm kind of going to jump ahead to this. Why do you think we are the one of the only countries here? I'm looking at the mothers first. That does not have any of this kind of paid leave. And in our current economy, I forgot to kind of finish this point, but by saying you still have your job but you're not getting paid, you're basically forcing people to go back to work, right? It's like this fake, oh, you still have your job, but most people live paycheck to paycheck, so taking off is not reality. So why do you think we are sitting here in the red, whereas if you look around the globe, other countries universally almost have at least some kind of paid leave?
I think our company prioritizes greed, prioritizes capitalism and money, and putting corporate profits and businesses being able to, like, make money over creating systems and programs and resources that will actually help people thrive in this country and as families. I think it's actually really insulting the amount of times that we, like, hear politicians talk about, like, wanting people to, like, have families, and then we don't have the infrastructure to support people when they do. And so I think when you think about, like, rising cost of literally everything from eggs to houses and how people can't afford things, but at the same time they're wanting everyone to have babies no matter what, but we can't afford childcare. We don't have paid family leave that actually allows you to bond with your child, but also recover from whether it's a C-section or vaginal birth. So I think the priority is, like, you see in other countries where there's so much more value on family, on spending time with your loved ones. That just doesn't exist in this country, where it's like, nope, like, we want to make sure we're prioritizing getting richer, even if that means leaving other people behind.
Yeah, so two things. The rising cost of childcare too. I'm going to pull up this chart here, but it is outpacing like everything, like you said, is getting more expensive, but childcare is getting even more expensive at a faster rate. And I also saw, like, there's been meetings on the House floor. The problem with childcare is it's a unique industry that needs government intervention to actually, like, address it, different than other industries. So, like, unless the government actively intervenes in this, and this is from, like, childcare experts, it's not going to change. And what you also mentioned that's so frustrating is the Republican Party is the party you're talking about, where they are getting, instead of creating an environment that is conducive for people to start families, they want to force people to start families, right? Like by taking away a woman's right to choose and different metrics like that. And it's really troubling. And I do agree with you. It's like a lack of empathy and caring, but at the same time, it would actually benefit the country more in the long term to invest in children at the beginning.
Yeah.
Like, so it's so, the whole thing seems to be very hypocritical and confusing. And it doesn't seem like, to me, anyone is interested in actually addressing the root cause, at least at the federal level. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
I think what's most troubling to me is that the people who make our laws, that are making those decisions, are often not women. It's often people who are maybe a little older and have been in government for a really long time and are really out of touch on what it takes to like have a child these days, but also to raise a child in our current economy. When I think about like how unpredictable birth is, I think a lot of people think that like, oh, you just like your water breaks and you go to the hospital and you come home and then like go back to work. And it's so much more than that. Like I said, I ended up having a C-section. I couldn't drive. There was a lot more like care that I needed. And again, like I said, my husband only had 2 days. But you think about, there's people who spend their entire leave in the NICU, caring for a child, maybe if they were born preterm. And so there's not one size fits all. And we need policies that actually factor in, that have the flexibility for the various like birth experiences that people are going to have. And there's not people who are, actually advocating for that in Congress.
Yeah, and I think like just from my perspective, so as a new father, and speaking to the physical toll that like birth has on people who do give birth, I tend to feel like I'm pretty empathetic. I'm pretty like aware like childbirth is tough. I'm gonna have to be there, but even me being relatively aware, I was still shocked at the physical toll that childbirth had on my wife. So I just think it's important, as a male speaking, if you're a male out there listening, childbirth is no joke. And like, as Janae said, my wife had to be put on like magnesium. So then she was bedridden during her birth. And then there was a lot of complications and she even had trouble walking when she got home. So think about having a child and then not living in a country that guarantees any pay when you have that child. And you're, could be in the NICU, could just have, struggling physically after childbirth, and there's really no reprieve for families in the United States. And then, like you said before, at the same time, we have people asking us to have more babies without creating an environment that's conducive to raising a family. And then I think another part you mentioned is like how disconnected our politicians are. It's not just age, it's also money. Like if you look up the net worth of our politicians, the reason why I am a progressive and I identify with that wing is if you look at the net worth of the progressives and what they're talking about, they connect so much better because they're not millionaires and billionaires. Whereas if you look on, a lot of our politicians, both Republican and corporate Democrats, like they get funding from corporations. And I think you mentioned this at the beginning. Corporations don't want to have to pay people who aren't working. And that mixture of that greed and then legalized bribery that we essentially have in this country leads to, a country run by corporations. And then, yeah, I think what we need to delve into deeper too, is what specific policies would you like to see passed in the United States? Because one thing that's insane to me, like, your husband, me, and my wife, we all had a child, a similar experience, but the leave was drastically different. And like, that is like, why does your job have anything to do with how difficult your childbirth experience was? Like, that is crazy to me that it should be decided job by job, corporation by corporation. So let's nail down to, the details. What would you like to see implemented in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, because then it creates this inequity in experiences that people are having.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a realistic, like bare minimum, what I think Congress should be passing, and then there's an ideal state. So for me,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
yeah,
Love
it's
it. Love it. Love
like
that.
so I think that there should be minimum 16 weeks of paid family leave for birthing parents, as well as their like spouses, significant others, as well as adoptive parents. I think if your policy is not inclusive of the different types of families that exist, it's not the right policy. So I say that minimum of 16 weeks. I know that they often say it takes about 6 weeks to recover from a vaginal birth, 8 weeks for a C-section. And then I think about the rest of that time really being dedicated to like bonding with your child, adjusting. And so 16 weeks, your child's maybe 4 months, and maybe that's when you're starting childcare, which still feels really young, but feels better than what a lot of people are getting, which is either no time or 6 weeks. Um, I think in an ideal state, we would be getting 6 months. Everyone would be getting 6 months of paid family leave that you'd really use that time. That is what my current company is offering me for baby number two. It's a little shy of like 6 months. I'm not bitter about it, but they say 6 months, but it's a little shy of 6 months. But um, I can't express like how much better I feel this time knowing like I have 6 months, my husband has 4 months now at a new job that he has, and knowing that like we're really going to be set up to like adjust to this like new family of four lifestyle and being able to dedicate time to this child. And it breaks my heart. I think it's because I'm on this side of TikTok, but like I see so many stories from moms who are like, I have to go back to work and I've only been home for 6 weeks. And I'm like, your child like is still adjusting to being in the world. Like, so
Mhm.
yeah.
No, I love the breakdown of like I do that a lot too. Like for instance, gun control, I have a pretty extreme stance on what I feel that should be, but then I have my stance for like we're in the freaking United States. So
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah.
so I think I a big thing I like to do in this podcast is remind people we're the richest country in the world. So if other countries can do this, we have no excuse not to do it. It is active choices by our elected representatives why this is not done. And I need like people to understand that we have the money, we have the resources. If you tax the rich more, we would have an abundance of resources. And I think like another important thing to realize is we have this really polarizing relationship with taxes in the United States because when we pay our taxes, it doesn't benefit us. We pay our taxes and it goes to subsidies for billionaires and people like Elon Musk. The happiest countries in the world are actually taxed incredibly high, but that tax money comes back to them through like quality public
Yeah.
education, long
And they
parental leave.
see it and feel it. And I think that's something that we just don't in this country. And one of the things I think is so important, and I'm so glad that we're like doing this because I feel like everyone should be angry about this. Like whether
Yes.
you are whether you have children, want to have children or not, like you should want to live in a country, the richest country in the world. You can't America can't say that it's the best country and then not provide the same type of resources and programs that other countries are providing. Like we need to do better at educating on like what other countries are doing, what exists out there so that people know, hey, like we should be up in arms that we're not getting that. Like why are we so far behind on what could be when other countries have figured it out?
Yeah, and that I think one thing that like the Republicans have done, Republicans are very good strategically at politics, way better than the Democrats because the issues aren't on their side, yet they win every single time. And what they've done a very good job of is policies like paid leave or universal health care, they call them extreme, but we are the only country who doesn't do these
Yeah.
things. Like, how is that extreme when we are the actual extreme ones? Like, it just doesn't make sense. And once again, I'm glad you reiterated we are the richest country in the world. So there's no excuse when other countries have figured this out with less resources.
Yeah.
Um,
I think what the
Go.
Republicans are really good at is like making it seem like some of these more progressive policies are like impossible and too
Right.
and unaffordable and like we can't accomplish it. And because we don't really have good education, people don't realize that it exists in other places. And so I think that's really where the challenge is. So people are like, yeah, no, like universal health care, we could never afford that. Like universal childcare, like no way. And yeah.
Yeah. We also, I think, I don't want to get into this too deep because this could be a whole conversation, but we also have an infrastructure in this country where, like, the Republicans have tricked some of the most impoverished people to blame other poor people for the problems and cheer on rich people destroying the lives of other working class people. Like that to me has been like shocking. Like when they, like the Doge cuts, like guys, these are not politicians that you hate. These are everyday people just going to work trying to make a living. So for people making, like cheering that on to me has been like, whoa, we really don't understand who's being fired, what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, but that can be a whole separate thing. Last thing I want to touch on a little bit is just I think the guaranteed leave after childbirth is a huge like thing, but then you have to send your kid to some kind of daycare, some kind of service, theoretically, if you don't have grandparents or, ways to help out like that, which most people don't, even though JD Vance said just have grandparents deal with it.
Which,
So
can I just say, in this country where our wages have clearly not caught up to the cost of living, where people can barely save for retirement, where like grandparents are working well beyond retirement age, and the solution is for them to stay home and take
yeah.
care of kids. Like, I'm like, we're
Yeah.
not set up for that.
No.
So,
No, it's so frustrating because they speak of this utopia that like could theoretically exist. Like I would love it to be a situation where like either me or my wife could choose to go to work and we could live office, and they just say, why don't you just do that? What do you like understand the economy? Like what do you mean? Like it would be nice to have that option. Like I'm
yeah.
sure a lot of people would only send one person to work and have that stay at home, but like that's not reality. And going back to your earlier point, our lawmakers are so out of touch, they don't understand that we're struggling to survive. So these ideas that you're throwing out aren't like realistic. But yeah, so what do you think specifically in terms of the price? Like, if we are sending, you mentioned over 10,000, I don't remember the number. It was so shocking. It kind of blew my mind. But like, how do we also, or what would you like to see Congress or elected representatives do to address child care cost?
Yeah. I think this is a good like point to talk about, right? Because it's not just the family leave, but it's all connected because then you think about like we spent $14,000 last year on Austin's childcare, and then we're, right now thinking that we're going to be spending around 30K when we have two kids that are in childcare. Mind you, that monthly price is more than our mortgage. So we are basically paying two mortgages, not to scare you.
Yeah. What do you?
um, but I think there's a few things. Like, I think one, having a better family leave from the beginning, right, forces it allows people to have kind of a little bit of a reprieve before they have to start paying childcare costs. So I think that that's like the first part, right? I think the next part is like maybe it's like improving our like child tax credit, like so that people are able to use some of that money to help pay off what they're paying in childcare to help contribute to it. I know that was something, if I'm not mistaken, that Kamala was interested in when she was running.
Yeah,
So
and
kind of
and
helping.
not to interrupt, but the child tax credit was proven to bring kids out of poverty. So it was this during COVID when they increased it. Um, it like took a record number of kids out of poverty, and then immediately when it lapsed, the kids immediately dropped back into poverty. So it's like we had addressed an issue. It was successful. The Democrats were trying to continue it, and then it was voted down, and kids immediately plummeted back into poverty.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to mention that was successful at least lifting kids out of poverty. I
Yeah.
think we have to address the system, but it at least did achieve that. But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, no, no.
Mm.
You're totally spot on. And I think so, I think it's a part, like I said, the family leave, it's the child tax credit. I think the other thing is you talked before about like our like budget and how people often think that we can't afford things. Can we look at the Department of Defense? Can we start to like look at maybe some of these agencies that like have not passed an audit and have not, how they're like effectively spending, not to like pull a Doge, but like there is some efficiency that is needed, not in this wild, crazy way that they're doing things now. But I think there's some room there. And how I think that money could be like utilized as well is in like whether it's like better government subsidized like childcare options for people. It's giving people a little bit of reprieve so that they're not feeling that like $15,000 to $30,000 like feeling every year as they're trying to put their child through childcare. And then I think the last thing that comes to mind for me is like maybe bringing in like universal pre-K as well, because I think that when you are able to have access to pre-K earlier, so whether that's at age 3 or 4, and if it's affordable, if it's whether it's through the public school system, that's less time that you're having to pay like a private
Right.
daycare. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. I do the universal pre-K. That is something I researched a lot too. And I don't think this is a reason not to do it, but because I mean, this is a separate issue because the education system struggles so much to like identify kids early on who have like disabilities and certain things, what can happen, like one of the pushbacks is, well, the kids get even further behind if you start early. So the kids who are kind of disadvantaged. But my pushback to that is then fix the system so we can support kids better. Like that would be my proposed solution. But that's like one pushback with that. And like parents to a certain degree who have kids with certain disabilities, that would make sense because our current education system won't function to address it. But like ultimately, I would like the whole system fixed, and that would be my push. I love everything also you said there. One other thing, and I think Kamala Harris ran on this. I didn't see the logistics, but I'm a big fan of percent of income being how you pay certain things. So that goes to like municipal fines, different things like that. Because if you have a fine that's like $100 and someone's living in abject poverty, that $100 can then get fined, and they eventually could pay like $500 because they couldn't pay it on time. So I'm a big proponent of things like this. Like you can only spend X amount of your income on childcare. And you would use your last year's tax returns or something like that to indicate it, and that would create a more fair, I feel like, equitable system. Obviously, you would have rich people push back on that, but I think that creates a more equitable system that allows everyone to thrive. So what do you think about that one?
I think it's more realistic. Like I think that like at the end of the day, like whether you are making $30,000 a year or $130,000 a year, if you have children, they need to go to childcare. Like you have a job that you need to do, and we can't afford the same type of childcare at those salaries. And so how do you make it so that people are able to still put their children in safe environments, making sure that they are getting set up for success, so that by the time they are going into the school systems, they are ready. And if people are having to pay the same kind of money for their childcare, or there's not really any like systems in place to make sure that people can, because you know what happens is people cut out other things. Like when they have no other option, they're either choosing unsafe childcare options,
Mm-hmm.
or they're having to kind of skirt other areas, and when it comes to housing and food and other necessities. And so by making it based on income, you're kind of giving people that reprieve that they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just think like as we wrap up here, one of the things I want to re-mention is investing in young people early benefits society at large. Yes, it would take some restructuring. It would take our lawmakers to do something, which is rare for them to do, or do something that actually helps us. They do things, but it's
Yeah,
nonsense.
actually do
Uh,
good.
right. But like, this is one of the frustrating things when I go and look at the map, look at the whole world, and I see us, the richest country in the world, not providing things that every other country provides, and how much it's setting our young people back because it's putting strain on families, and kids pick up on that. That trickles down. And like, I just wish, heading forward, getting a little bit of confidence with I don't know if you've seen the oligarchy tour,
Yes.
but they turned out 34,000 people. In Denver, that is insane.
Yeah.
So maybe we have a little light coming. But I
Yeah.
don't know. If the people want to reach out to you, Janae, is
Yeah.
there a way they can reach out to you to talk a little bit more about childcare?
Yeah. And honestly, I will like literally talk their ears off. So, I mean, I'm on Instagram. I deleted X because, not supporting anything that Elon's
Same,
doing these days.
same, same.
But yeah, I can be reached on Instagram at J_Janae. So people can.
Perfect. And I will put that in the description. So if you guys want to reach out, you can find that down there. Thank you so much, Janae.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
I hope you guys enjoyed that interview there with Janae. As I said during the interview at the tail end there, I will put her contact information in the description if you want to reach out with any follow-ups. So thank you to Janae if you are watching this for joining. But we do need to finish, as we always do, with our shout-outs of the week, or our shout-out of the week. This time will be one individual, and it is Cory Booker, representative from New Jersey. I did a small shout out for Representative Booker on Wednesday's show, but I definitely needed to reserve the Sunday show for this specific shout out. He broke the record for the longest speech on the Senate floor at a time of 25 plus hours. And one of the beautiful things about this speech is it surpassed a representative from South Carolina who had previously held the record, but what he was filibustering against was the Civil Rights Act of 1957. So it is poetic justice that you have a person of color up there breaking a record that was held by someone who was trying to restrict that same person's rights. So that was kind of a cool twist there of the story. But in his speech, like the context of his speech or the content, he spent his time slamming Trump in this administration. So I'm going to play some of his best moments from the speech now.
Stop listening to the bombastic loudmouths on the radio and television and the internet. To hell with them. Let's create incredible lies, magnify them on social media, try to spread them with our influencers and everybody. So now people believe that somehow, oh, the president talked about all this money going to transgender mice. That's a lie. I mean, the child tax credit that was unfortunately not made permanent cut child poverty in America in half. It worked for an entire year. If you're telling me thousands of people right now, 71 days into the Trump administration, are losing opportunities in the sciences to do research in the most important areas of human endeavor, can't get hired, they will go elsewhere. This is not a partisan moment. It is a moral moment. This is not a left or right moment. It is a right or wrong moment.
And I want to finish by saying, after watching some of those highlights and seeing this fight, Cory Booker, I owe you an apology. I did see you speak, a kind of fun fact, at George Washington's University's graduation about 10 years ago, it was a while ago. And I've been tracking him a bit, but I did not think he had this level of fight in him. If I would have listed 20 Democrats who would have done something like this, he would not have made the list of the top 20. But what I'm not going to come on here and do is be afraid to admit when I was wrong. So Cory Booker, I was wrong. But if you then go vote and do other things that are counterproductive after this, then the fight ends up being counterproductive. So round of applause for your effort here. But we are going to be tracking and holding you accountable for your policy decisions heading forward. But love the fight. Democrats, once again, take notes. The more fight, the more it generates, honestly, free media. And the more it gets voters intrigued by you. And it may lead more voters to your side. Okay? So that wraps up this episode on unpacking the childcare crisis in the U.S. with my second guest ever. Hope you guys enjoy the guest format, but let me know what you guys think below in the comments, including if you have any questions, or you can join or comment over on any of my content over on Instagram. So until next time, this was TJacks Unpacks. See you guys. Thank you for watching and being part of a growing progressive community. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you have the time, check out some of my other episodes you can see around me. Thank you.